So, hi everybody, I'm Jennifer. If you read the session description, this is an open mic night. So if you've ever been to an open mic night, it's really a chance for you to perform and get feedback. So my hope for this is that we'll have some brave people that will type "pick me" in the chat, and then I'll call on. So I'm going to keep track of who's saying "pick me" and who wants to present. And then when you're called on, you can unmute and share your activity. The audience, let's provide feedback in the chat so that when at the end, if you want, you can copy and paste that feedback into another document, right? That way you're not trying to record stuff and work on your activity, right? So you'll have your stuff at the end where you can copy and paste it. But I really just want, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have been struggling with the whole online transition. And some of the stuff that I typically do, how do I flip that into an online environment? And I'm kind of terrified to go up in front of my students this fall with something that I'm hoping will work, maybe. So I thought this might be a really good night for us all to use each other as a safe space to practice before we go out in front of our students and do something that completely bombs, or even something that was okay, but now that we've done it once, we can think of 20 different ways to do it better. So that's my hope for this session. I see we've got a couple people, so if anybody wants to volunteer, pick me, type it in the chat. So just literally pick me. I hope everyone can read the rules. I put them on the screen so that I wouldn't have to keep saying them over and over again. I thought that'd be easy if you can see my face. You can see the information, so how you get picked, and then this should be a safe space, so please, I know that we want to provide helpful feedback, but I want it to be helpful feedback, right? Like, let's be kind to our colleagues, even if they fall flat. You know what, that's why we're here. It's a safe space so that we can kind of, I mean, personally, make a fool of myself before I go in front of my students and do it. At least I can do it once and make sure that y'all learn something. You might notice I have a semi-big personality. I like to use backgrounds. I try and find ways to make them helpful for my students. So in class, a lot of times, so this is my little interaction, in class a lot of times I put information on the slide and I talk about it, where virtually, one of the things that I found is using these virtual backgrounds to provide information about what we're supposed to be doing in a way that I can still be interactive, but not have them get lost, right? So you put, okay, here's the activity that we're working on. You're gonna forget it. You're gonna wanna look up, instinctively, you wanna look up at the PowerPoint behind me, but there is no PowerPoint behind me because we're on Zoom. So what are you gonna do? So this is one thing I've been trying, is putting information on my virtual background. So just using PowerPoint or Adobe Photoshop and putting a text box that has the information. And then I try it out visually. I've never tried this in a group. This is something I was like, I think this would be very helpful. So I would love some feedback from the current audience if you could type in chat as to if this type of thing you think would be helpful for your students when you have them thinking about activities. These are the rules of the activities. Now let's do the activity. So I'd love your feedback on my new pedagogical procedure, which is instead of having a PowerPoint behind me, I'm using my virtual background to do it. The only thing you do have to be kind of careful of is, like, if you're a big hand talker, right? You have this big section over here that no one can read what it says because I've got my hand in front of it. So, you know, just kind of keep your hands down. That's hard for me. So I'll give you everybody like 30 seconds, kind of type in some feedback for me. What do you think about this? You all feel free to turn on video too. I like seeing faces. Although, Jesse, I love your dog, so I like seeing doggies too. So I used Adobe Photoshop to create this. I found an image online. And then I just used Adobe Photoshop and the text tool. But you could also do this and put it in PowerPoint, paste the photo in PowerPoint, and then add a text box. And then if you select all, right, so you've got the picture and the text box, you can right click and save as picture. So if you right click save as picture, it'll save it as a JPEG to your computer.
Okay.
How do I get off center? That's literally about sitting on my chair and kind of squiggling myself about until I find the spot I want. And then I just pay attention to where I put my body, right? So right now, my camera is built into my laptop, so I can't move my camera, so I have to move me. If you have an external camera, it's probably easier to sit where you're comfortable and then move your camera to where it's showing what you want it to. But mine's built in, so it's just easier to move my kind of squiggle around until I get right where I want to be. It's like, okay, so now my hat is not covering my text. I still got my mic, so I look like I'm hosting an open mic night, and we're good to go. So that's, what other questions do we have? Who else has something that they would like to share with the group? I know y'all have to have stuff that's been burning in the back of your head going, should I do this? Should I not do this? You know what, Paul, that is a great point, and I should have thought about that. Why doesn't everybody, wow, way to go me. I got so excited about like, let's do this, and I completely forgot. Let's do introductions. So that is a great point, Paul. Why doesn't everybody take a minute and type in your name, where you're from, and what you teach? So I'll do it real quick for me. I teach at Manchester University, and I teach principles of biology, which is our 100 level intro to biology. I teach microbiology, cell biology, and immunology and marine biology. Yes, it is a very wide range. And this semester, I get to teach ecology lab, which I've never, ever done. So in a virtual pandemic environment, yay, go me. Oh, San Diego. I love San Diego. Anybody, no field trips? That would be terrible, to be in San Diego and teaching marine biology and oceanography and no field trips. I mean, I think it's bad enough I'm stuck in Indiana teaching marine biology, so no field trips. We'll be watching lots of videos. And I am having guest speakers come in every Friday since we're online anyway. I'm bringing in, I got on Twitter and I took all my Twitter friends that I knew in marine biology and I invited a whole bunch of them based on their research, how it would fit in with my class. So that's another thing you can throw in there to make your class quickly more relevant, right? So a lot of times we're teaching concepts and they're important and we want students to understand the concepts, but they lose sight of what does this actually mean in the real world? And most of the time, people on Twitter especially, we're into science communication and we like doing outreach. So if you say, hey, can you give 30 minutes of your week to my class? We're going to be learning about microbes in the ocean and you study deep sea microbes. Could you come tell them how this work actually applies? Instead of just, hey, here's our microbes. They're super cool, super important. They live in the ocean. You get someone that's like, my research is, and they tell them all about something that's new and just happening. So that's another nice way that I've kind of beefed up my pedagogy for this new online world is I still can bring in guest speakers. For those that just joined, we're introducing ourselves in the chat where we teach and what we teach. And then this is really an open mic night. So y'all get to drive what we do tonight. If there's anything that you're curious, how is this gonna work? Is this gonna fall flat? Is this gonna be awesome? What can I fine tune here? That's why we're here. So in the chat, you type, pick me, right? Wait until you're called on, so I'll call your name. You get the floor, so you get to turn on your mic and turn on your video and share your activity. I want the audience, I want y'all to be providing your feedback in the chat, because then when the speaker's done, they can copy and paste all of that information into another document instead of trying to pay attention to your feedback while they're trying to run the activity, right? So that gives them the ability to reflect on this later and just be in the moment doing their presentation. So like I said, this was mine. This was my new pedagogical thing, is I'm putting text on my virtual background so that the rules are up there. Everybody knows what you need to do. So if you want to present, is this an activity I do in my class? Not yet. This is something I'm trying out here. Course Hero has given me the floor to fall flat or do awesome. We'll see which way it goes. But this is something you could do, right? What questions do you have? Or I do a lot of activities where I have them think about a problem, like think, pair, shares. So this would be a good way to put your think, pair, share on and then give them those moments to think. And they don't have to try and remember what that prompt was. But you also can still be engaging with them instead of it just being a static PowerPoint and your voice over the PowerPoint. So that's what I'm planning on using this for, is for think, pair, shares, so that when I have them, I want you to go do this task. Oh, Paul, you are awesome. A virtual marine bio intertidal field trip for my class. Thank you. Very, very helpful. So some of the other things that, when we had the emergency shift to the pandemic, one of the things that I did that kind of, I guess, got Course Hero's attention was I made videos in costume. So you might have noticed I have a big personality. I'm dressed up like I'm presenting on a stage. I've got my stage and my microphone, and I'm ready to go and be the host. I'm an MC today, right? So anything you can do that will engage your students in an online environment is helpful, even if it's kind of out there, right? Like I literally did a whole video where I dressed in a Star Trek uniform and I called them cadets, and I used a GIF to beam them up with sound effects, right? Like, so the screen went, and then they were, welcome aboard, cadets, right? Like I did the whole thing in character for like 7 minutes, and they had a problem they had to solve, and they had to go to the discussion post and answer, this is what they did to solve that problem, right? Like, we've noticed this new outbreak of this new strain of Romulan flu, but it's affecting Klingons. What is going on, cadet? Right? Like, so any way you can just find to be creative and infuse some of that joy and giggleness, I guess is what I call it, right? Like I want to make my students kind of giggle at me because I know they're having fun. And if you're having fun, you're gonna learn what's going on. That worked really well. I got a lot of really good feedback from my students on that. So I just grabbed all the basic fandoms. I did Star Trek, I did Harry Potter, I did Doctor Who, right? I just started grabbing anything that I knew people were big fans of. I did SpongeBob, and I wore a fish face mask. Okay, like I dressed up like a fish and did SpongeBob. So yeah, anything like that. I really would like some volunteers. So I can sit here and like yammer for an hour and a half. Trust me. My kid will tell you that I can sit here and yammer for an hour and a half, but it'd be a lot more fun if this was interactive. So who has an idea? I know we're all struggling with our pedagogy. So what do you normally do in class that you're thinking, how am I going to put this online? What am I going to do? Say pick me, and then let's troubleshoot it. Let's figure it out for you. So come on, someone wants to talk other than me. I know y'all do. That's why you're here. I give y'all the silent treatment. I do it to my students. Come on. Who has an icebreaker that they think is going to work awesomely online? or thinks it's going to work terribly and wants help to figure out how to make it awesome. I'm kind of good at that too. Like, you tell me your idea and I'm pretty good at troubleshooting. It's another reason I think Course Hero likes me. So I'm fairly good at troubleshooting. Anybody use Bitmoji? It's a little app you can make yourself, right? So you can make a cartoon version of yourself. As soon as we went online, I did that. And all of my replies to people's discussion posts were Bitmojis of me going like, yeah, you did it, good job, star, high five, right? Like, again, ways to interact and be more than just, okay, here's a video, go watch it, let me know when you're done, right? But every time that they would interact on a discussion post, I would say something back. If it was a theme discussion post, I got a whole bunch of Star Trek GIFs, like Captain Picard clapping. Yeah, Bitmoji, Bitmoji. How do I get Bitmoji on my computer keyboard? I actually just save them as JPEGs, so you can save, export to your phone on the app, and then I email them to myself. And so then I upload them to Canvas, and I can just select them from Canvas. So yeah, you have to use your phone to get the image, but once you download it to your phone, you can just upload it wherever you want. And every so often I check to see if they've put something new out there, because I feel bad using the same 20 Bitmojis over and over again, because there's only so many ways to say, good job, you did it, gold star. So, you know, like every month or so I check to see if they have anything new. Sometimes I change my outfit, but I still use the same one just so it looks different, right? Like change my Bitmoji outfit. A lot of this for me, for online teaching, is making it exciting for the students. I swear when I was doing the theatrical different, I swear my students logged on just to see what crazy thing was this girl going to do next, right? Like half the time it was like, okay, every class session was a different theme, every single one. And so I think they were just logging on to see like, what is she going to do now? And I'm good with that, right? It gets them logging on, it gets them watching. And I got a lot of feedback on my student surveys about how the videos, one student actually had the gall to say that online was more fun than in person in the class with me. Like, one person actually had the gall to say that. Like, okay, I know I'm doing something right when they're like, you know, I was having a little bit of trouble engaging when it was in person, but man, once you start doing those videos, that was awesome. I came in every day to watch those videos. It's like, turn yourself into a Netflix show, basically, right? Something that they can binge watch, and they're into it. The big topic on your mind is labs. So what I did when we did emergency pandemic was use a lot of lab resources that are already out there. So this, I was teaching microbiology lab in the spring, was my only lab. And the CDC has like disease detectives, which I used for epidemiology. And HHMI has a DNA extraction to identify bacteria, like in a clinical setting, and they have a ELISA. So I was doing a lot of just grabbing what I could find off the internet, because everything was brand new and I was super freaked out. But in the fall, I will be teaching principles, which is our introductory biolab 106. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is everything online, but having them set up. So we have a nature preserve, having them set up biodiversity survey that they will do as the seasons change, September through the fall into early winter, and look at that same plot of land and collect data every week, while the online component will be, how do you write this up? How do you turn this into an actual lab report? How do you go and get stuff for your introduction? How do you go and get stuff for your, you know, what are your materials and methods? How do you write that? And one of the reasons I'm leaning that way is because if we get sent home, so right now we're supposed to be on campus. But if they send us all home in like October, that's something that they could do easily at home, right? They could pick a spot in their backyard. They could pick a spot at the forest down the road. They could pick a spot in the field, like whatever it is that they have around, and they could still do a biodiversity survey over multiple weeks to see what is changing, right? And our introductory bio class is really just trying to teach them how to do science. So I want them to be able to do science. I have heard that there are some really good virtual labs. Labster has come up a couple of times. People told me about Labster. I am very cheap, so if it's not free, I don't like to make my students pay for it. So if you can find stuff, awesome. Strategies for individual students who seem to be struggling with the online class format. I am one of those people that will chase you down. You might tell I'm a little bit of bubbly, and I'm a little bit like, come on, right? So I will chase you down. I will send them personal emails, and we have their phone numbers. I have been known to call students and be like, hey, what's up? You know, and a lot of times I just sent a couple of students, I just sent very gentle emails like, hey, I've noticed you haven't logged on in the last couple of days. I haven't seen you on at our weekly check-ins. This is a really stressful time for everybody. What can I do to help you? How can I help support you? Because some of our students, we have to remember that they have other things going on. Some of them have jobs. A lot of my students went back home, and they're the oldest of like 7. And so now it's them and 6 siblings all fighting over the one low bandwidth internet connection in rural Indiana. You know, so they didn't have the time to do it. And so part of that was, okay, how do I best support you? What can I do? And finding what works for that individual student. Most students, they're not struggling because they don't want to be successful. They're struggling because there's stuff outside. And by helping identify, you can help them troubleshoot it, which is my basic if students are struggling. And again, I never would say chase your students down in a mean way, right? Like I chase my students down in the sense that I don't let them just disappear, right? If I notice that they're not online, I send them emails. I'll send them 3 emails, and then if we have a phone number on record, I will call them, right? And more of a, I'm concerned, there's a pandemic, are you okay? Right? How can I help you? Like, yeah, chase them in a good way. Don't chase them in a, why haven't you been in class? You got it wrong, right? Like we don't want to scare our students. Most of them are terrified already. Anybody ever notice that? A lot of undergrads already are terrified. So, I mean, I teach undergrads. I'm sure high schoolers are even more terrified. Yay, I have a volunteer. Jen, would you be lovely to unmute and take over?
Okay. I'm going to go back to labs because, as I said, that's what my thing is. I spent I teach majors bio, and I spent the entire spring term on HHMI. I just stole all their things and I adapted them, and my students liked it. They knew what they were doing, but I really want the hands-on stuff. And so this fall is our diversity unit. So we do diversity in regards to like phylogenetics. So they make trees and things like that. And so I'm trying to think of ways to get them involved and active. And, you know, you talked about the diversity project that you're doing. That's sort of something that I'm looking at. But I think the really big thing, so I managed to get textbooks like this online inclusive thing. So it's really cheap. And so they have no extra cost beyond registration. And then they let me put a $70 microscope as a requirement. And so now I'm hoping that students will get those microscopes. And then there's a small set of slides that I also found, prepared slides that ultimately I figure will work all year, not just for fall, because I doubt we're going back. Anyway, one of my ideas is to have them do a diversity kind of either journal or notebook or something where I give them a list of different things that they're only going to see in a microscope, and not really tell them where to find them, but have them like have to draw what they see and explain why they think it's in that category, and what group that it's in of the 5 kingdoms or whatever. And I guess all of those ideas and other ways, like I really like the oohs and ahs you get from microscopes. So I really want to make sure that the students are in there, you know, I even got myself one of these yucky microscopes to use so that I can troubleshoot with them and all this other stuff. But what other things can you do to make diversity more interactive? That's, I guess, where I am.
Anybody have ideas? I mean, I have ideas, but anybody else have ideas? I feel like I'm talking all the time.
Yeah, a scavenger hunt. Exactly.
A scavenger hunt.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think a scavenger hunt would be awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
But I like stuff like that.
Yeah, I was thinking this is a project where they have to figure it out.
The other thing that you can get, you can suggest for your students, there are adapters for cell phones where it'll turn their camera into a microscope lens.
Yeah, I tried that, but they're not great.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't expect them to be great.
Yeah, and I really want the experience of them working with the microscope, right? So one of the other projects I do here, my son just made me this. Does anyone know what that is?
Is it a tardigrade?
It is. It's a tardigrade. My son made it on his 3D printer for me, so it's cool. But I love working with tardigrades because students haven't seen them, and they see them and they're like, oh my god, right? And so, you know, I want to start the term off with them finding some moss and lichens and soaking it overnight and squeezing it and then seeing the tardigrades, right? Those are things, and tardigrades are big enough for them to do with one of those microscopes that you can attach to your phone. But if you want to do like protists, right, they can go out and collect pond samples, right? And they can see more than just protists in there. But if you don't have the better optics, you can't get down to that level, and it's not as ooh and ah. That's where, you know, what I kind of thought about it. So I don't know if anyone's saying anything. Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, they would be taking pictures. I like to have them draw, because drawing is a good way to build the connections in their mind, and they notice those characteristics that they need to, you know, that what puts it in that category.
One of the things I have done with, hang on, I'm going to throw the link in. I do stomatopulse a lot, and that's something that's really easy to teach. I just threw my YouTube video in there that shows how you actually do them. But they could look at, I blow kids' minds all the time with this, because they just think a plant looks like a plant. They have no idea that plants have cells. Like,
yeah.
You know, so having them look at even things that are more common up close, this is a really easy way to do stomatopulse. That might get you some of that wow factor.
Yeah.
Have you thought about iNaturalist?
Yes.
Because you can.
That's a citizen science.
Yeah. You can set up an actual class and have all your students join it, and then you can set up like goals, right? Or I'm thinking about doing small prizes for whoever this week has the highest number of diversity. They get to pick a sticker, you know, like a goofy biology sticker, right? Like, it's not high stakes or anything, but you know, something like that to just kind of keep encouraging them to strive. To explore, right? What can you find? So the nice thing about iNaturalist is they can log it to your class, so you can actually see like all of what your class is doing. So if they do have to go home, or if they're already staying home, I don't remember what your institution's doing.
Oh, we're online.
So if you're online and they're already, at least you can see like where they're finding these things, what things they're finding, and you can track it over the semester. So that's, I know for me, a lot of times sending them home, it's like, well, how do I keep track of what they're doing other than when they send me emails? So that might just be a way to kind of keep track. Plus, you're adding data to the database, so I like big data.
Yeah.
Any other feedback for Jen? You can throw it in the chat, and then if you want to chat, or you have something you want to try, you know, type "pick me" in the chat, and then I'll call on you. You can share your activity, and we'll provide feedback. Yeah, so Paul says he has students walk along the seashore, take pictures of something natural, post it in the discussion, identify it, and then try and identify it, and then afterwards, okay, so go see what it is on iNaturalist, right? Like, so have them first, can you do this identification? Jen, something else I've done for like keys is have students do them with stuffed animals, make their own keys, right? Like everybody has random stuff around their house, you know, like, so yes, no, is it blue? Yes, no, you know, like it doesn't have to be great, but at least it gets them that idea. You know, like it's again that idea. I used to do that with, I would bring in a bunch of plushies and do different, give them to different groups. They'd have the same groups, but they'd have to create their own key and then make them shift the key, right? Like, can you identify? Shift the key and give them one, or, you know, can you identify what this is, right? So that's something else, you know, that you can think of if you have students that are close together. You can have them be like, okay, post your key and post an example picture and see if can you identify what it is? Because that's the only way you know a key works, right? Like, I can make keys till I'm blue in the face, but until I give them to somebody else and see if they can actually identify something with it, you don't know if it's a good key. So I know you're talking about phylogeny. I like doing it with common things before I have them do it with like actual science.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of like making a key to protists that's kind of like that, where, you know, you start out with, is it green or clear?
Right.
And you can, and so that they can get a general idea. And yeah, we've done the stuffed animal thing before in our non-majors classes. So that works really well. We do it with candy bars, but
hey, do they get to eat the candy bars?
yeah.
Then obviously it's a great activity. Like,
it's
free
funny
candy.
we had to alter it because you don't think about it, but there are people out there who haven't had candy bars, and so they can't make any of their distinctions based on taste or what's inside, because if they're just looking at the candy bar, they can't do it.
And I mean, that goes back to how keys were originally made, right? Like,
right.
Some of our keys are crap in terms of actual relatedness, because they were looking at, does it have feathers?
Yeah.
Right? Like, yes, no. Is it bipedal? Yes, it's a human, right? Like that doesn't necessarily work. So yeah, keys have to be refined as we get more knowledge. Yeah. Who else has something they'd like to troubleshoot or chit chat about with this wonderful pandemic pedagogy that we all have been thrust upon? It's so weird, right? Like our college, our plan is to come back. But students were specifically told, pack light, right? So bring as little as you can to campus, which means they're planning at some point that we're probably gonna all have to bug out. So I know I've got kind of two plans going on right now. Like, okay, if we're face-to-face and I can do this, but when they get sent home, how do I move this to something that's more virtual? We also, if students feel uncomfortable coming to campus, they are allowed to request that all their classes be virtual. So I might have 24 students face-to-face and 1 student virtual, and I have to do that effectively. So that's also going to be fun. I have no idea how that's going to work. Right now, my plan is hope and pray that no student does that. Like that's literally my plan, is because how do I do that? Right? Like how do I don't know. I'm sure I'll figure it out, but right now, this whole pandemic has me go, I am such a planner. Normally by this time I would have all my syllabus and like the first 3 weeks of classes done, right? Because I am such a planner. This whole pandemic has me like, yeah, things are going to change. I'll wait. I've got like an outline. That's it. That's all I got. Because I know it's going to change. So remember, if you want to have your thing featured, just pick me in the chat. If you have any questions that you don't really want to talk or share an activity, but you just have questions that you'd like some feedback on, type those in the chat. I'd be happy to answer them. Ooh, completely new teacher teaching AP online in high school, hoping someone has lab suggestions that young scholars can do from home. HHMI, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, is your best friend. They have so many virtual things and they're all free. And they've got like a wide variety. Anybody else have really good for anatomy and physiology that you just really like? HHMI, man, they are epic. I'm sure there are other ones too. That's just the one I always go to. Yeah, it is like building my course on sand because I just know it's going to fall apart. So I don't want to put too much energy into it. I'm like, I'm a single mom. I've got very limited energy to begin with. So I don't want to spend a lot of time and then build this wonderful class that's going to be shot to pieces in the first 2 weeks anyway. I do encourage you in your syllabi to put some language in there. Personally, I put what is going to happen when I need to communicate with them. So I bet everyone has syllabi language that says this course is subject to change, because we all know that lectures don't ever go the time that we expect them to. I specifically put in mind that course content and delivery may change. Any changes will be communicated with you via Canvas announcement so that my students know where to go to find out about what's happening with my class should something on campus change, right? So I encourage everyone to think about that and provide them with that information now. If things are changing, how do I get that information? Where do I go? I personally use Canvas announcements. Not everybody has Canvas. Some people do group emails, you know, whatever it is, but I told them how I would communicate with them. Adaptability for evolution. Yeah. I steered away from using any coronavirus activities in the spring because I felt like we were all stressed enough about coronavirus that I didn't want to bring it into the classroom. This fall, on the other hand, well, next spring I'm teaching immunology, and let me tell you, the gloves will be off on coronavirus because all the literature is coming out so quick that they can actually have that real world stuff really quickly. But do you think about, if you're going to use the pandemic in your classroom, do you think about any potential mental health issues that might cause your students? Because this is stressful and they might not, while we're like, oh, it's relevant and it's going to be applicable to the real world, it might also be kind of triggering. And so you want to be kind of thoughtful, not saying don't use it, just be very thoughtful with how you use the current pandemic, because I know I don't really like thinking about it. You know, I'm sure it's stressing everyone out. I would be better, my son, right? I'm a single mom. My son's class, their district just came out and they were like, all right, here's your options, choose. And they were all terrible, right? Like there wasn't a good option to choose from. So I don't like using the pandemic as teaching tools because I think we're already getting enough onslaught. I want them to be able to learn without any kind of issue like that. So just my personal 2 cents. Some new people have either come in because my gallery view keeps shifting. So well, this is just open mic night. We're here to troubleshoot and pilot any type of pandemic pedagogy or that you're trying to work on. Let's say you're used to teaching face-to-face, now you're going online, you want to see how an activity will work. All you need to do is type pick me in the chat. I'll call on people, you share your activity, and the audience will provide feedback in the chat. If you have just some questions or some troubleshooting that you'd like help with, go ahead and type those questions in chat and I'll talk about them. I'll give my 2 cents and people can give their 2 cents in chat. The reason I'm having people do most of the stuff in chat is when you're providing feedback, the person can, after they're done, copy and paste the chat into another document so that they don't have to be trying to take notes about what your feedback is while still interacting, right? So that way it's kind of saved for them so that they can get to it later and have that time to reflect on it. So what else do we have? I told people when they first got here, you know, some new faces, this is my new pandemic pedagogy. When I want to do active learning, I'm putting it on my virtual background. All right, so there's the rules. So students know what they are, right? So I don't know about you, but I've been to lots of workshops these last few days, and there's lots of information here, right? But they say it, and then they expect me to remember it. And then they throw me in a breakout room and expect me to remember it, right? Like, so this is just my version of how to kind of help students. Okay, what were we doing? Right, okay, this is what we're doing, right? I did this in Adobe Photoshop, but you can do it in PowerPoint. Just use a text box over your image and then save, you select all, right click, save as a picture. Then you just set it as your Zoom background. So this was my, I'm gonna pilot this and see how it works, because I was hoping it would work for my active learning stuff online, but I'd never tried it. So far, everybody seems to think it's helpful. Also helps with those of us who are, what are we doing again, right? Like, because again, this is Friday night of 3 days of Course Hero workshops. For those of you that might be in other disciplines, this week was also the Botanical Society of America's yearly meeting and the American Society of Plant Biologists meeting. So it's been a long week of workshops. So this is what we're doing today, because I was gonna forget. Like, I knew I'd forget. What did I tell them to do? Because it's been a long week. So who has questions? Who has pedagogy? It's a lot of workshops. It was a lot of workshops. I've given a workshop every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I've been in charge of a workshop. And as soon as we're done, this session is over, it's gonna be 8 o'clock my time. I'm taking my kid, we're making popcorn, and we are watching a movie. We're gonna snuggle up on the couch and we're gonna watch a movie, because we all need a little bit of downtime. I'm a big fan of making things fun. You might be able to tell, right? Like, I stole my kid's bow tie, and I've got, you can't see it up close, but the black and white's actually comic book strips, right? Like, so I'm a big fan of making things fun. I would definitely encourage you, especially if you're online, to find ways to make it engaging and fun and kind of silly, right? Like, people like silly. They remember silly. I have always been that teacher. They've always known me as that teacher that they'll remember how to do something because I'll have this weird dance move that we're doing for it. And they're like, well, oh yeah, okay, I got it, right? Because however you can engage students that makes them remember is important. What other courses are you teaching? I'm at a very small liberal arts college in the Department of Biology. And so I have 8 different classes that I teach, not all at the same time, thankfully. You know, some of them are every other year, but I teach a wide variety. I teach microbiology, immunology, cell biology, marine biology, principles, which is introduction, all the labs associated with all of those. And then this semester I've got ecology lab for the first time. So good ideas for case studies online. It depends how in depth you want your case studies. One of the things that I like to do is make it like a murder mystery, right? So you think about, here's all your clues, and then you have to be interactive on the discussion, because then as they come up with ideas, you have to send them on the right path. So like yes, no, right? So what are you doing? Okay, I'm gonna run a PCR, right? So then you give them the PCR results, right? And then, but you have to kind of be really interactive. It's not something that you can just, okay, here's a case study, right? But break that case study down, and they think outside the box. I'm gonna do an ELISA, and you're like, oh crap, I didn't have an ELISA ready for that. You can just be like, your ELISA doesn't show anything. What other techniques could you try, right? Like, kind of push them. What other techniques can you try? Perhaps something using DNA. You know, so, but yeah.
Would you do it as a discussion board?
I would for online. I would do it.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Pupper. Hi, Pupper. I love dogs. Don't worry. It's cool. I have my headphones in. Otherwise, my dog would be going crazy because your dog went crazy. That's how dogs work, right? Like, I do. I had them do a couple of things this past semester in micro on the discussion board in terms of case studies. So I would give them part in the discussion board. They'd have to read it, and then they'd have to answer the questions and what would you do next? Right? And so then they'd respond, what would they do next? And then I would post again, okay, awesome, now, right? And have them do the next part. So it takes a little bit because you have to be responsive, right? Or you can tell them, the other thing you can do is tell them, I'm going to post the second part tomorrow morning, right? So please get your stuff in tonight, right? And then you don't have to feel like you need to go and respond to everyone as they as they come back. So then you can do a big response. Here's part 2. Or you can do it individual. I did a couple where I set groups separately in the discussion board, and then I had them all post what they learned at their case study in a class-wide discussion board. So I gave them 5 different case studies, right? So each group had a different case study and they were working through it together on the discussion board. And then I had them go to another discussion board and tell the class what their group's activity was and what they learned, so that you could still get more than one case study experienced. It's really fun, but it is, I'm going to be honest with you, Shirley, it's more work than just handing them a case study and having them work through it in class might be, because you have to have it ready to go. And the more creative you can be with it, the better your students will engage with it, because we live in a world of Netflix binge watching, right? The more that you can tap into that, what they spend their activities on, going to escape rooms, right? Write an escape room type thing for microbes, or have them create a microbe that would survive under these conditions. This is one I've been thinking about. I'm going to start talking about something I've never actually done. It's just something I've been thinking about. But having them create their own microbes and then doing a battle of the microbes on the discussion boards. So have them like justify why their microbe would be better than the other group's microbe. And, so they have to think about life history strategies and habitats and competition between like this new microbe that they created that can live on steel and poop out electricity versus this microbe that this other group created, right? And just set up kind of like a microbe battle. That's something I've thought about doing for our diversity module, is have them do something like that. I haven't done it, so if you do it and it's awesome, please let me know, because I'm not teaching microbe in the fall, which is sad. It's one of my favorite things to teach, but I get it back in the spring. So we had a faculty member on sabbatical last year, and so a lot of our students are off by a semester, so there was really low enrollment in the fall. So we just canceled it because it didn't seem worth anybody. Honestly, the university didn't think it's worth the amount they pay me to teach 3 students. So yeah, there's only 3 students enrolled, so I don't get to teach it in the fall, but I've got like 35 in the spring, so they'll make up for it. Anybody else? Other things you want to troubleshoot or chit chat? Again, pick me. I'll call on you. You can share your activity. We'll provide feedback in the chat. I am a big fan of being as creative, and especially online, as bigger than life as you can, right? Like, how do you not just demand the attention, but get there to be like, okay, cool. What are we doing next? Okay, what are we doing next? So I like having my students create stuff. In micro, one of the things we do is they do an art project that they compared 2 different microbes using some kind of art medium, and they get to pick whatever they want. And it's always so much fun to see when you let them go and do whatever their creativity. I've had students that have whittled me an amoeba and a paramecium out of oak, right? Beautiful, right? And how are they the same? How are they different, right? They showed that there were vacuoles with the knife work, but they had different shapes. The amoeba was clearly in pseudopodia movements, right? Like and the paramecium had a bunch of different stroke marks to show all the little cilia that were on it, right? I've had students bake me cupcakes. Oh, those are my favorite. guess they taste good. But they make me cupcakes, and each cupcake is decorated with like a different view. So a microscope view, a habitat view, right? Like how this that was an algae one. So red algae versus Chlamydomonas, right? Healthy ocean versus non-healthy ocean, right? So they had goldfish crackers that were dead on the beach versus goldfish crackers that were happy in the water. But you know, you let them go, you let them have fun, and they learn something, and they're engaged. They keep coming back to see, well, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? So I do that in person, but you know, anything you can do online, same thing. Some people who are already here have already heard this. I'm filling time until somebody comes up and says, pick me so I can stop talking. One of the things I did was I did everything in costume in the spring. All of my lectures were themed. So I would dress up in a Star Trek uniform, and I'd welcome the cadets to the science station, and I'd present them with this problem and that they needed to go back to the academy and figure out what needed to be done to solve this, and send me a transmission, aka go to the discussion board and write up what you would do, and I'll let you know what to do next, right? I did one as dressed up as Harry Potter to teach at Hogwarts, right? So Harry Potter, I had a Hogwarts virtual background. I had my wand and I was waving it about and tapping it against the camera to get their attention. You know, like I carried that into Canvas. So when they would respond, I would use GIFs from Star Trek or Harry Potter or Doctor Who or whatever fandom it was that I was using to respond and to tell them, great job, good job, cadet, excellent work, cadet, close, but what about, right? And then I'd use Captain Picard clapping, or, you know, Captain Janeway, just whatever I could find, you know, and things that I did a different fandom every class period because I wanted to make sure they'd come back and not get bored. And literally some of my students were like, they just wanted to see what I was going to do next. Right? They just wanted to come, what's going to happen next? There was only one that I reused, and it was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because I reused Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because we were doing immunity, and so I did it for both the innate immunity and the adaptive immunity lecture, right? I didn't want to come up with a whole nother costume. But yeah, I mean, I have like full costumes, virtual backgrounds. It was awesome. I had this for my Doctor Who bow tie, and I put my dad's big trench coat on. Right, so it gave me nice broad shoulders because I put my dad's big trench coat on, and you know, it was. I know it takes a little more work. My students know, yeah, right. Like, and some of them they didn't get. And some students were like obsessed with, oh my gosh, you did Doctor Who, I'm so happy, and other students are like, what is this? So you know, you're gonna hit some of them and not hit all of them. For me, it was also fun. I really don't like the idea of, hello, I am talking into a camera and this is what we're talking about. You know, it's like I could put on a show for 10 minutes and then upload it to Canvas, and they could watch the show, and then we could interact on the discussion boards. So that's something I suggest, is whatever you can do to make it fun. And I believe it was Mr. Rogers, who's one of my favorite people ever. I believe it was Mr. Rogers who said that, you know, the easiest people to learn from are those who are having fun and you're watching them do it. You know, like you're having fun and students are having fun because you're having fun. So don't, you know, do what what makes you happy. Anybody type pick me in the chat? Let's see what we got. Nice fez, Jessica. Nice fez. I stole my son's sonic screwdriver when I was doing, because he has one. So it's like, actually my son became a very big help of props. Right? Like I would just go raid his costume drawer, be like, all right, what do we got in here? Thanks, dude. My 13-year-old's like, Mom, where's my, it's like, it's in my video studio because I stole it. It's cool, sorry.
Yeah, my kids have so much fandom stuff, we could just go for days. That's some great suggestions.
Right?
I'm not exactly sure where her sonic screwdriver is. She finally moved it off her desk. But
What?
absolutely.
Yeah, no, right? Like have fun. Be silly. They remember it.
And hope the stuff
My
doesn't
mom
come in
had a Doctor Who club, and they built a, sorry, ignore my dog. they built a life-size TARDIS for their
Oh.
campus. And then her and I flew to Raleigh last year and met David Tennant and who played Donna? I can't think. Catherine Tate last year. Yeah.
Awesome.
And the students could take pictures with the TARDIS. It was up all winter, so you could go into the TARDIS, and yeah, they just loved it.
That's so cool, Christy.
Yeah. One thing I was gonna bring up, I had to teach an intro class last year to biology, and I thought this was really helpful. You know how you have to teach the students like the scientific method, and we usually use like, you know, the concept of like flashlight's broken. We ended up using if your laptop breaks, even though that seems kind of simple thing to switch. I'm like, your laptop is broken or your phone is broken, right? Because all these kids are super obsessed with technology. What would you do to try to fix it? And then to make those connections to the scientific method. Okay, so you have a phone that it's not working, but then what do? You test your charger. Well, why did you test your charger? Well, because I thought maybe the battery died. And so teaching them the scientific method isn't just for science, that it's for everything and that you do in life. And that seemed to be really helpful.
That's a great idea. And make it more realistic. Getting invaded. It's cool. So what else about, hi, sweetheart. There, you saw him. Yeah, anything you can address in your syllabus. So Jen just said that'd be a great idea to bring in syllabus stuff, like how do you take care of classwork if the internet is down, right? You know, so if you're online learning and the internet is down, what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? That's another good troubleshooting for the scientific method that's a little close to home right now. Also, I do suggest everybody with your syllabus be as clear as possible. Like, what do you expect them to do if their internet does go down, right? Like, how do they communicate that with you? Or if things change, content or delivery of the course are going to change, how are you going to communicate that with them? So like, we're starting in person, but I don't think it's going to last. So in my, right at the top of my Canvas course, I have it written that any changes to course content or delivery format will be posted in Canvas announcements. So that tells them where to go, right? Like, anything we can do right now that helps cut down on their is helpful. I mean, I'm sure all of you feel that way. Anything, if the administration could think that way and like just kind of be clear and helpful with their communications, that would make us all feel better, right? So if you can emulate what you wish your admins were doing when you set up your syllabus for your students, that would be probably very helpful for them. Let's see, anybody else? What else can we troubleshoot? Ooh, a murder mystery? Oh, that sounds really cool.
I was just gonna ask,
yeah.
So I teach anatomy and I have a couple students, I pre-surveyed all my students, I have 140 this semester, and asked them what are some of the things they didn't like about last semester, if they've had an online class before or just in general. And I've got a kind of split between some of them wanting worksheets and active things to do, whereas others don't want any sort of like kind of homework, which isn't realistic, but you know, dealing with the different learning styles. Do you think it would be too much work to say, okay, this week for anatomy, you can either do this worksheet or you can do a video explaining or, you know, draw out the structures, whatever like fits more learning styles. I feel like grading wise, that would be more work on my TA's part, but I only grade pass fail anyway. You make an honest attempt. But I'm just trying to think about the different learning styles and like you said, making it more engaging for the students. You know, if anyone's got any recommendations for that.
Yeah. Personally, I'm a big fan of choice. Again, it's a lot more work for us, but I feel like everything that's helpful for our students is a lot more work for us, because they're going to be more engaged if they have a choice. I have learned this with my kid, right? Like, not what do you want for breakfast, but I will make you toast or I will make you pancakes. Which would you want, right? You give them, this is how you're going to earn your points. You can do this or you can do this. They feel like they have ownership over that. well, it was my choice. I chose to do this, not, oh, Chrissy made me do that. She's so mean. I didn't want to have to do that stupid thing, right? Like, if you can give them a choice, and if you're grading pass fail, I don't think it'll be that much extra work for your TA, whether they're scanning a document to see if it's correct or whether they're watching someone's 4-minute video to make sure that it's mostly correct. You know, it doesn't sound like you're going to make them have to like nitpick it and, oh, they better use this term, you know? So anybody else have any
No,
thoughts
it's more
on
for
that?
them to get them to practice, to have something to
Yeah.
do, to look at the material before the next week. I always tell my students, it's the amount of effort you put into the work, right? So if you just, you know, half-ace it and go through it and just put random stuff, you'll get your points, but you won't do well on the testing quizzes. So try to incentivize them to be wanting to do this. This is to help you versus me giving you an assignment just for the sake of points.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of not giving students assignments just because you need to have something for them to be graded, right? Like there should be a point. It sounds like your point is very well made, right? Like you're doing this to help you to make sure that you understand concepts so you do well on the exams. And again, I like giving students choice. I think it's helpful for the students. Jorge said that he uses a murder mystery for the scientific method, but submit their work hypothesis report in the scientific format. And that sounds amazing. Would you like to tell us more about that? Because that is just like, that sounds incredible. Okay. Okay, I get that. My son's already come in once. I don't know if anybody saw him shove his face up in the background. My kid's already come in once, so I totally get that. Kids hear lots of noise. He loves to do that. He has to make an appearance. I went to the workshop before this with theatrical in teaching, and he did all of the theatrical stuff. He was like, oh, can I? So he came in and he laid down on the sofa and he rolled off. You know, I was like, this works for me. So, but one of the things you could do, Jorge, that I don't know if you have, but you know, if you have a Course Hero account, you can post those kind of resources, and then we could see, well, how do you set that up? Like, what instructions do you give the students? How do you? I mean, don't share like, oh, these are my students, what my students have done, but that outline. How do we then teach it?
More of a question or a piggyback.
Yeah.
To the response about having a TA kind of grade the work and the assignments. Just a small introduction. I'm Roberto Lozano. I'm part of the tutor operations here at Course Hero. I've been with the company for about 4 years. So I don't have a classroom. I don't have students, but I'm always interested in, like you were mentioning, we all have kids, or most of us who have kids understand the pressures of working and multitasking while trying to get them to get their education and get the points across that they're supposed to be taking away from the learnings and courses. But I find that, you know, being that my wife is here helping, we're both working from home remotely, we're able to kind of moderate and manage and structure her kind of assignments and study sessions. And so now that school is ramping up again, the season's about to start soon, we're thinking about, well, how can we structure and create kind of like someone to be the point of contact or a moderator to make sure things are getting done. The reason why I bring that up is, have you explored, not like a TA, but assigned someone as a moderator within your students, or identified those kind of leadership skills or leaders in your groups and made them like a part of the actual rotation and helping you get your curriculum or get your points across, or help you grade assignments or manage the whole chat that may be going on? Because obviously it's a different setting. Here we're thinking about, you have a group of moderators or people who are in charge of the room and breakout sessions. So similar to that, I know it may not be easy, but have you found some techniques or tactics that can help you with that technique, Jennifer, or anyone?
So I haven't tried anything like that yet. This upcoming semester, I'm going to have TAs for some of my intro classes, and that's actually a really good idea, is to set the TAs up as kind of like the moderator for making sure students are logging on and making sure that they're getting that stuff turned in, because I'm going to have let's see, this fall, I think I have 13 credits that I'm teaching. So it's a pretty big load and lots of students. So, you know, I think if you can engage your TAs in a way that's helpful is great. Christy, if you can use your TAs to make sure that they are getting some of that information correctly, but in a low-key way. Sometimes students do better when it's a TA giving them feedback than when it's us, right? They just feel like it's not quite as threatening. Most of the time, my TAs know most of the students anyway, because my college is 1,100 students. Like, we're teeny tiny. We have 1,100 undergraduates. That's it. So most of them know each other. Even if they're the TA for the class, they're in that club together, or they play that sport. You know, it's like we're a very small campus. So yeah, using your TAs as peer instructors would probably be a really helpful thing with this online transition, because you can only do so much. You are one human being. And I don't know about you, but I have life outside of my work. I love my job. I do. I adore it. But I'd also like to have life that's not just moderating Canvas. So, you know, yeah, use your TAs as moderators. That's a great suggestion, Roberto.
I was in an MCAT prep class, and what they did is they had the live instructor talk and present and answer questions in the chat, but then they had 2 off-camera TAs to engage in the chat and privately, so that the students could ask questions maybe about study habits, maybe about something they didn't understand with the lecture. And so that's how I'm going to use my TAs in the fall as well, is I'll have a couple of them attend my lecture every day. And that way the students can reach out to them and say, hey, I didn't understand what Christy said, because I can't stop for every single question, right? And most people, we can stop for a couple of them. But that way the student has someone to actively go to during class and be able to say, hey, I missed what she said. Can you please repeat that, or whatever the case is. But having them in the classroom is a really good idea, I think.
Yeah, especially online, because we start lecturing, and depending on what format you're using, right, the chat can kind of be hidden if you don't like make sure you've got it set up. Like I've got it set up right now where I can see it, but sometimes it's down in the bottom. You don't necessarily see the chat window popping up, and so they can be asking questions and you're still lecturing because it's awesome and you're excited and it's lecture time, but then students are asking questions and you're missing them. So by having those TAs, right, like they can make sure that nobody gets lost in the cracks, so to speak. Especially it sounds like, Christy, you're at a little bigger of a university. You know, you sound like you might be at a university where they have 1,100 students in a classroom versus like the entire campus.
Yeah, we have this semester, I think the biggest we have is around like 300 or 400 students, at least for my department. So not too big, but definitely bigger than my original institution, which is maybe at most 120.
Thanks for coming, Shirley. Yeah, I did my PhD at a big university, so I'm familiar with teaching 500 students, and I really, really like teaching 20 better. Like I could get the largest class in my department and I would have 40. Like that'd be the largest class. Like that's as big as we get. And I'm like, yes, it's so much better. I know all my students by name. I actually really like teaching. So this fall I get to teach Principles 1. So the entry level, so all the first year students, I have half the lab sections for all our first year students. And I really like that because then I see them again in microbiology, and I see them again in cell biology, and I see them again. By the time they graduate, I've known them for 4 years and they're like crying and hugging me and I'm gonna miss you, because you know, you become like close with them. I have a couple that I really have that, I feel like, protective mama bear, you know, it's like, oh, don't you dare. You know, I don't think I could get that if I had 300, you know, like how am I gonna learn 300? Class of 20, and then I see them 3-4 more times in the course of their 4 years there. I know them when they graduate. I have one student, she just texted me the other day. I almost cried. She just texted me the other day. She got accepted to a PhD at Michigan State. So she's up at MSU, and she's like, I just finished decorating my apartment and your picture is right above my desk. So like she hung me right by her work desk. She's like, because you're one of my inspirations, and I know if you could do it, I can do it because you're amazing. And I was like, ee! right? Like she actually hung me up in right where her work desk is in her apartment. I'm right there next to her parents. Like it's her parents and it's me. It's like, I feel like if we can be that for our students, that's awesome, right? Like that's what this is about for me. I mean, that's why I really like what I do, because I want to be that for my students. I had that from some of my professors, you know. So yeah, okay. Let's get back to actually pedagogy and not like what other weirdness are you guys worried about? I mean, it's also getting late and it's the end of a long 3 days. So if nobody has anything, we can also, you know, feel free to skip out early, because depending on where you're at.
I think that's where I'm kind of more afraid. Obviously, my daughter is a little younger. She's 12 years old and she's going to 8th grade. Yeah, I believe 8th grade. But you know, one thing is like interacting and making sure you can get people to participate is always a challenge, right? And sometimes not everyone's going to be, especially introverts. They're not going to want to be outspoken, even if it's just chat. And so I found that, you know, one thing is which is the challenge now I could see, is how do you get people to interact and really get them to respond, right? How do you do it in a way that's, I'm not picking on you, but I am picking on you in a way to make sure it's just for your growth, right? Obviously it's more challenging when you have to do it for 500 students. Christy, you know, more power to you. That's versus 20 students, right? So it's a different quantity of students you have to interact with and a lot more personalities. But like, what techniques have you found that are kind of like pick me, or I'm going to make it a group activity or a breakout session that doesn't really seem intrusive, but they were effective?
So I'm a big fan personally of not forcing interaction. I don't feel like putting students on the spot is necessarily the best way to get good engagement with them, but I will pay attention. And I am one of those, I said a lot earlier, I will chase you. Or like, I'm one of those professors that I won't call you out and be like, Roberto, you haven't said anything. You need to start speaking up or I'm going to come down there and get you, right? Like, I'm not that type of that professor, but I will send them an email or I'll grab them in the hallway and be like, hey, I noticed you were really quiet. Or especially this pandemic, I've had students who just kind of disappeared, you know? And so I'd send them an email. I've noticed that you haven't logged on to Canvas at all. You haven't watched the videos. I'm just concerned. I mean, things are really, really stressful right now. And if you're struggling with something, I'd really like to help you out with it, you know, like kind of find a way to connect with them one-on-one. And a lot of times after you have that relationship established, they become more interactive online. Right. Like I do believe that was one of my biggest saving graces in the spring was we went online at spring break. So my students already knew me and they knew I would chase them if they didn't interact. And again, not in a mean chase them, but just, are you okay? I've noticed you don't seem to really be engaging with the material. How can I help you? Because this is important for your learning, right? Like I'm trying to help you be successful. One of the things I always ask my students at the very beginning of classes, I have them, how do I best facilitate your learning? And, you know, I use a Qualtrics survey, and that's one of the things I have them tell me, how can I best facilitate your learning? Not how do you learn the best or but how do I help facilitate your learning? And I did that at the pandemic as well. About 2 weeks into our online, I sent out a Qualtrics survey and it's like, things have changed drastically, right? Like, how can I help facilitate your learning? How can I help you stay engaged even though we're in this weird situation? So I think a lot of times if you just reach out to students, they will realize that you care about them as a human being and you want them to be successful, and so they engage more. But it's really hard. Like, I haven't in this session, right? Like, I'm not going to pick someone that hasn't wanted to engage and be like, turn on your video so I can see you and you need to start talking. Like, no, I'm here to facilitate and to help. I'm not here to put anybody on the spot. It's harder when you don't already have a relationship.
Very
That's
true.
That's one of my biggest concerns about the fall is, I don't know, you know, I looked at my rosters though, and I have 25 in genetics. I've had 20 of them before in other classes. And out of my 12 in marine biology, I've had 11 of them. So I was like, all right, I got this. Again, small school for the win. So what else do we have? My kid's getting more and more dramatic. It must be getting close to 8 o'clock. Survey tools, I use Qualtrics because we have an institutional account. Google Forms can also be very useful, and it's free. Again, we have the account, so it's free for me, and I know how to use it. But Google Forms is something you can get. There you go. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. My apologies. You know, we're all at home, and occasionally we have some things that come up. I think the biggest thing with your survey is you need to pay attention to how you're collecting and using the data, right? So I use Qualtrics because I can set it up to be anonymous, or I can set it up to make them put their names in, but I know that it's going to protect their information, right? Qualtrics has got its own privacy settings and everything. So I'm always worried about data collection and how I'm managing that whenever I use surveys, because FERPA is a real thing and we want to protect our students. So I know several faculty that use Google Forms, they use it very effectively. So I would recommend that just because I have really good friends that use it, and I use Qualtrics. I love surveys. I do a survey at the beginning of class, I do a survey at the middle of class, and I do a survey at the end of class, in addition to what my institution does at the end of class, to get specific feedback on on my class, not just rate your instructor on a scale of 1 to 5. Rate your instructor's preparedness on a scale of 1 to 5. You know, I can ask them things like, which of the following active learning was the most helpful to you, right? And then list all of the active learning techniques that I used in the course. Which was the least helpful for you, right? Like, of all of the labs that we did this semester, which was your favorite? Which was the suckiest, right? Like, which one should I never do ever again, right? Like, so I always, in the middle of my semester, I'll send out a survey that says, which of the active learning have been the most helpful for you? Which of these active learning techniques would you like to see me add? What can, after, you know, we've been here a whole half semester, how can I continue to support your learning, right? Like, I like to send one out in the middle so that I can make changes based on the individual group, because I get that information at the end, but that doesn't really help me with that class. That helps me make changes for my next class. So I've started sending out midpoint surveys. I did that with the emergency 2 weeks after we went to online. I sent out a survey. How is this working for you? What is working? What isn't working? You know, and I found that they really didn't like the jigsaw puzzle. So like when you give each group a different piece of the puzzle and they have to work it out and then you bring the whole class together. I was trying to do that in discussion boards and they really hated it. Like, really hated it. But they loved the ones when I was giving them problems to solve and they could do the problems on their own and then respond to the discussion. But they couldn't see anybody else's response until they posted, so they couldn't copy other people's response. And they loved that because it was like problem solving and it was interactive. So I didn't do any more small group jigsaw puzzle things for the rest of that semester. I just did, okay, let's do problems and let's do theoreticals. Here is, you are a CDC epidemiologist and the following information comes through your office, right? And then they have to respond to it. So that's what I use my surveys for, is to gather data. I guess what I'm really trying to say is use surveys thoughtfully. They get a lot of them, right? Like, I don't know how y'all feel about email after email after email, you know, but whatever you're doing, make sure it's thoughtful, not just busy work for you or them, right? Be very, I call my pedagogy purposeful pedagogy, right? Like, everything has a purpose behind it. And I communicate it with my students but I can easily communicate it with my peers as well. Like, well, why do you do this? This is why I do this. I send out my survey at the midpoint so that I can make changes that help my students learn better for the rest of the semester, because every person is different. And halfway through, they can tell you what they like and don't like about your teaching, let me tell you, right? And by using Qualtrics, which is anonymous, they don't feel like, well, I can't tell her how much I hate when she does X because she'll know it's me. No, I have no clue, right? Like, I get it all anonymized. It doesn't even collect their email address in the forms, right? So I don't know who said what. So they can tell me the stuff that this sucks and I hate when you do this. I can be like, okay, this is not working for this group. That's fine. I have lots of tools, right? Like, I got Batman's utility belt over here. I don't have to constantly be using bat shark repellent if I've got a class full of octopus, you know, like, use purposeful and make the changes.
I sent out, like I said earlier, I sent out a pre-survey to my students, basically asking them their experiences, and the qualitative data I got from it let me know that my students were really anxious, but it also let me know what they're really concerned about. And so I ended up doing a follow-up email to their comments and say, here are the most, frequently commented things regarding the survey. Here's how I'm addressing them. And I got multiple emails saying that they really appreciated communication now versus waiting till the fall to, stress out about what's going on. So even if you're not like set in stone with your syllabus or your course, I found that it's really helpful just to give them some information. Like, yeah, I know lab is up in the air. We're not sure what we're doing, but here's, how we're working on it, or some kind of communication. They just appreciate that. So I don't know if anyone else wants to do that, but I got about 85 people responded out of 120 before my class filled out. Yeah. So they're willing to tell you. You just gotta give them the opportunity.
And you get a reputation, at least I have a reputation, that I listen to my surveys. So when you send out surveys and then you're consistently listening to your students and making changes and communicating with them, you get that reputation on campus, which is a good reputation to have, right? So students don't feel like they're just, this is the most common complaint I get from students about like our university-wide. They just feel like they fill out these stupid surveys and nothing happens, right? So they fill them out, but everything is the same. Where when they fill out my surveys, I change based on their feedback. I changed my way of teaching to better suit their needs. So yeah, Christy, that's fabulous, right? Like, I would be terrified to send out something to my students right now because I have no clue. It's like, hey y'all, I'm just as freaked out as you are, so what are we gonna do?
I know some of them were like, I'm concerned about lab, and I just wanted to be like, me too. But I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that though, because I got sick one year and couldn't teach, so I made YouTube videos for their lab. I sent them home. I'm like, go home, I'm sick. And the number one thing I got in my survey was, we love the YouTube videos. It was a great study tool. So the following semester, I made all my videos, labs, as YouTube videos as well, so that after lab they could review them, and then other people's sections were using them for their study tools. So, and I tell the students, if you give me comments and feedback in the survey, I will take it seriously, and they really appreciate that.
They do.
It's another sign that they think is us caring, which is good. I'm not trying to like fake it, but that's just another way that you can indicate to your students that you care, is that just listening.
Hey Christy, do you have those videos linked to your Course Hero profile?
I do not know. I don't
You should,
think so.
because I want to go watch them now. So like,
Yeah.
when I go search your name and like friend you on Course Hero, I want to be able to watch those videos because they sound amazing.
Yeah, so my instructor actually recommended, this is the first video of the summit I've actually attended, because I just found out about it. So Course Hero I'm a little new to, but yes, okay. I would absolutely
share a link in chat.
Oh yeah.
What?
She said share the link in chat.
Oh yeah.
I go under Christy Bunny because I don't want to be YouTube famous, so ignore the last name.
I don't want to be YouTube famous.
Yeah, like, but yeah, that's for my anatomy lab. I go through all the models, which I'm so glad I did because COVID. Now I'm like, well, guess we're going all online.
No, totally something if you build your course, start building your Course Hero profile to link those under A&P, because those are great resources for other, I mean, especially all of us in COVID. We'd love to see how you're doing that. Well, it's about the hour, and I've had my kid in here 3 times now trying to get my attention. So any last minute thoughts from me? This has been great. I hope everybody's gotten something helpful out of it. I mean, I've learned about new places I can go to. I love the murder mystery idea for the scientific method. And Jorge, I really hope you put that up on your profile, because I'd love to take a closer look at that. And just how we're all dealing with this. So I am on Course Hero under this name, Jennifer Robison. My email is also going to be in chat here in a moment. I love pedagogy. I will talk all day long about pedagogy and what we can do to make our teaching more exciting and engaging and educational. So if you really just want to geek out with someone, please email me. I love it. I'll geek out with you any day of the week about what we can do to make this a better experience for us and our students. I mean, if we're having fun, they'll have fun. So thanks everybody for coming, and I hope to catch everybody some other time. So bye.